Well, here's where I feel like I agree with the old heads, where it comes to like the dying democracy when it comes to youth. I feel like we live in a generation where if you're saying something that the masses disagree with, you're automatically censored, booted, banned, whatever.
Yes.
You know, cancel culture is definitely a product of millennials on up because we are the birth of the internet, and that's kind of what's the driving force for a lot of these opinions and things that you hear. But let's not pretend that the old heads didn't have cancel culture back then. If you look at the Salem witch trials, that was the ultimate form of cancellation. Not to mention lynchings and I don't know why I did air quotes, but yeah, there's definitely ways to silence the opposition, and they don't want to address that. You know, they just see, oh, well, you're saying I can't say this on this platform. Well, that's against the First Amendment.
We know better than you. We've been alive longer than you. We have more experience, so therefore we know what's best for you because we've been where you've been.
That's the biggest problem.
So I think that's the mentality they take on, and if you question it or have a different ideology or a different way of approaching things, then they see it as anarchists. They see you as being disruptive. They see you as being, hard to deal with. You're
You know what's funny? It's the freest place on the planet, but I feel like with capitalism, it's the most monetized. So it's freedom, but we're paying for it in some way, shape, or another. All right, ladies and gentlemen, got me some loaded fries. We're about to talk about some stuff. What are we talking about today? Don't mind me.
All right. Today's topic: the younger generation is destroying American democracy. Intro. Here we go. According to a 45,000 participant College Plus survey on respect, tolerance, and open-mindedness on American campuses, the largest ever conducted, an appalling, this is their words, appalling 62% of students said it's at least sometimes acceptable to shut down a speaker, and 1 in 5 students said that using violence to stop a campus speech is sometimes acceptable.
They gonna learn some hard lessons in life.
Academia is the one place in the world where intellectual freedom is supposed to be welcomed and celebrated. Generation Z may claim they are the most tolerant, enlightened generation ever, but that's not the reality. So many students are so angry at so many things. It pains me to write these words, but I truly believe American democracy is in peril. So what do you think about that?
So my take on that is,
what do you think?
American democracy is always going to be something that's going to be a hot button issue, especially with younger generations. Mainly because the people writing these laws, they have like lifetime terms in like Congress, and then
Man, has always found it interesting when it comes to stuff like that. That we put a limitation on the presidency and certain other things, but Senate, the House, all these you can
Supreme Court judges can serve an entire lifetime,
and there's so many perks and benefits that people are even unaware of, like tax benefits and allowances, and you have so much power that you wield. And who's this? You can't. It's like everyone takes care of everybody, so you fall in line. You take care of this person, and that's just wild that you and you've seen some of their like salaries. The salaries are pretty astronomical as well.
Right. Well, it's the fact that you have these old heads who are making the rules in an ever-changing world. And as a I can't say I'm young. I am definitely middle-aged, it feels like.
It is.
But with the ever-changing world, you have a lot of these old heads writing laws that are not a really good representation of
current times,
circumstances.
circumstances.
Not necessarily current times, but you're trying to get the youth on board, and it's hard for the youth to get on board with some of these things.
And I think a lot of times they don't even take that into consideration. It's more of, we know better than you. We've been alive longer than you. We have more experience, so therefore we know what's best for you because we've been where you've been.
That's the biggest problem.
So I think that's the mentality they take on, and if you question it or have a different ideology or a different way of approaching things, then they see it as anarchists. They see you as being disruptive. They see you as being, hard to deal with. You're letting your age and your inability to have the experience they had allegedly that blind you. And we let our egos, which everyone does this, we allow our egos to supersede what is the best for the whole population, for the people.
Well, look at Joe Biden. He's been in politics for like 80 years, and he's like 80 years old.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I don't know. I look at it like this. So if you could like have one thing, change one thing about our government or about the United States in general, we could be like, oh, well, we could end racism, we could end hunger, that. No, let's limit terms in Congress. I feel like that's a smaller step because what you do is you get new ideas and new perspectives out there. And I'm not saying that we need to push any kind of like woke agenda or anything like that, but I do feel like there are not enough perspectives on a lot of the different changes going on in the world.
I believe it. I agree as well. I think there should be a little more balance. I'm not saying we need to take out every older person or senior or cut the age at a certain limit, but I believe that if we had younger, vibrant input. I mean, I don't even know if anybody's even in the damn 40s working, with the House, Senate, or anything.
Well, I don't know. Well, I think she's older than 40, but what's her name? Margaret Taylor Greene or whatever her name is.
No, okay.
The white chick who always talking all types of. She's the most immature in the House. Anytime there's a disagreement on the House floor, it's like, well, yeah, she's obviously the outlier there.
Yeah, but I believe that there should be more. You don't really have a group representing what's happening there now. These decisions you're making are setting you up for success, for the boomers, even the kind of the Gen X generation, but millennials and zennials are the ones that are left with the blunt of taking care of it. Who makes up most of your workforce?
Right.
That's what you should consider is who's it going to be more impactful. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It all matters, but shouldn't you have more speaking points from people that are younger hearing it, especially if they're legitimate concerns?
Right. Well, and you hear this all across the globe. Damn it. This goddamn fork. Sorry. Having a fat ass moment. You hear this from all over. It's like you said before, we're older, we know better than you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy I've been trying to race at work for the longest time. It's like, well, I got experience. I'm like, well, I got a V8 down here, so it's, come on, man. You can't. There's things that we can learn from the older generation,
Absolutely.
from their experience, but there's also things that the older generation can learn from the younger generation based on the adaptation of like technology and just the way the world works. There's a lot of things that weren't a big focus back then, like mental health is a huge one.
Yeah. Well, if you talk to most older people when it comes to situations like that, to them, which is partially right. This generation is a lot softer. I mean, things are easier. Things are it's a natural progression. Things are easier. Everything's instant. You don't even have to do your own grocery shopping anymore.
Right.
We're not hunter gatherers anymore. You don't have to be as strong anymore. I get it. Times are a lot easier, but that's the natural progression of things.
Right.
If we fast forward 5 or 10 years from now, especially with AI getting more and more prominent, we're going to see things are going to get even more.
Well, you say easier, but it's a cycle. It's always going to be a cycle.
Oh, of course.
You know what they say, easy times create weak men.
Yeah.
Weak men create what? Hard times. And So we're definitely in a path where we're definitely in an easy times kind of thing.
It is.
So I think if the younger generation takes a grasp at that, the older generation would respect that more, but I feel like also the older generation needs to respect that a lot of these new things that are making life easier are here, and they're here to stay, so we need to figure out a way to, make it work.
Yeah, I'm not saying we're not saying you should forget because our ancestors, regardless of wherever you come from, your ancestors planted the seeds to make it to where we are today. Everything's progressed, their innovativeness, creativity, and not saying that it doesn't exist anymore, but it's something we should not definitely lose out on. So when you have that kind of mindset where because of your experience, nobody can tell you nothing.
Right.
Then you stop that innovativeness and creativity from happening.
Well, here's where I feel like I agree with the old heads, where it comes to like the dying democracy when it comes to youth. I feel like we live in a generation where if you're saying something that the masses disagree with, you're automatically censored, booted, banned, whatever.
Yes.
Cancel culture is definitely a product of millennials on up because we are the birth of the internet, and that's kind of what's the driving force for a lot of these opinions and things that you hear. But let's not pretend that the old heads didn't have cancel culture back then. If you look at the Salem witch trials, that was the ultimate form of cancellation. Not to mention lynchings and I don't know why I did air quotes, but yeah, there's definitely ways to silence the opposition, and they don't want to address that. They just see, oh, well, you're saying I can't say this on this platform. Well, that's against the First Amendment. And I know I've mentioned time and time again, the First Amendment is kind of muddy water at this point, trying to figure out where that stands. Even with all these disagreements, we still have more rights than most of the world anyway.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of finding that balance,
Absolutely. And like I said, we made statements before. I mean, since we live in such a volatile time, since we live in one of the freest places on the planet, we have such a spelting pot of unique gifts, abilities, thoughts, processes.
You know what's funny? It's the freest place on the planet, but I feel like with capitalism, it's the most monetized. So it's freedom, but we're paying for it in some way, shape, or another.
And it's being weaponized for good, bad, or whatever. So you're absolutely right. But at the same time, we need to be acceptable for both sides. So, I agree with you with the older people, and I also agree that this generation can be kind of overly sensitive. People can overthink things, but at the same time, there should be mutual respect between both sides. You know better than me, or know better than us allegedly, but at the same time, a lot of these people tend to be close-minded.
Here's a tech that everybody can get on board. Fuck everybody. Everybody. And that's the thumbnail.
All right. With that being said, I'm Will Robertson.
Oh, shit. Malcolm Eugene.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Do you think times have become increasingly, or I should say democracy has gotten worse due to, apparently they're giving it more of the brunt to Gen Z. They're putting it on Gen Z. They ain't really talked about us.
Oh, speaking of generations, do you know the generation after Gen A? Or Gen Z, sorry. I just gave it away. It's Gen Alpha.
So we're starting over? Is that what that is?
Apparently. So I'm like, oh, here we go. Here we go.
Wow.
Well, Gen Z, get your shit together. Boomers, get your shit together. Stop blaming Gen Z. Stop blaming millennials. I feel like millennials get the blame from both sides.
Kind of left with the bag, yeah.
I'm like, come on, man.
Kind of left with the bag.
We're the last generation to play outside.
Yep.
And we're also the first generation with the internet. So it's sad. With that said, comment, like, subscribe. 1,000. We are outro.
Boom.